This is Leader Time by FedNet, your podcast source for daily floor remarks by Senate Majority Leader John Thune and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer. On Tuesday, May 12th, Thune focused on small business deduction and bonus depreciation in the 2017 tax cuts bill. The following material is protected by copyright.
Mr. President, last week was Small Business Week, and I was glad to be able to host a business roundtable last Monday in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and hear directly from small business owners in my state. I was also able to visit the Business and Health Innovation Center on the campus of Northern State University, which houses the Northern Innovation and Startup Center that provides support for aspiring entrepreneurs in northeastern South Dakota. Mr. President, Small Business Week is an important celebration, but the impact that small businesses have is felt literally every day of the year. Nearly half of Americans in the private sector work for a small business. Small businesses are responsible for a majority of the new jobs in this country. And a lot of Americans' first jobs were at a small business, mine included. Mr. President, there's nothing small about the impact that small businesses have in our country. And Republicans know that any path to economic strength runs through small businesses. And that's why they were a key focus of the tax relief we delivered in the working families tax cuts last year. This landmark bill locked in the lower small business tax rates that Republicans enacted in 2017, giving them certainty to plan for the future. It also made the 199A small business deduction permanent. Mr. President, I've heard positive feedback on 199A across industries in my state. In South Dakota, an agricultural cooperative estimates the impact of this one policy at over $100 million since 2017. And that money has been able to be passed on to the farmers that are members of that co-op. And I'm sure that those farmers, like so many small businesses across the country, are relieved that 199A is here to stay. Mr. President, 199A is just one of the policies in the working families tax cuts that helps free up money so small businesses can invest in their operations and in their employees. Another is 100% bonus depreciation, which is also now a permanent feature of the tax code. Bonus depreciation allows business owners to deduct the full cost of a new piece of equipment the year they start using it, rather than spreading that deduction out piecemeal over several years. Say you're a farmer and you need to replace your combine, or a manufacturer who needs to upgrade your machinery, or a plumber who needs a new truck. Those are all big expenses, especially for a small, maybe even in some cases one-person operation. So bonus depreciation helps small businesses take on that big expense by allowing them to deduct the entire thing in that 1 year. And the impact can be significant. In fact, a car dealership in my state was able to build an addition and hire 10 more people because of bonus depreciation. Mr. President, a lot of our small businesses and farms and ranches in South Dakota are family-run operations. Many of them have been in the family for generations, and the plan is to keep them in the family for generations to come. Unfortunately, the death tax has too often threatened these plans. When one generation passes the business on to the next, the death tax can take a big bite out of it. It can be devastating, forcing families to sell all or part of their family business, farm, or ranch just to satisfy a big tax bill. Not to mention the costly estate planning expenses that many families incur to keep their businesses from being ruined by a death tax bill. Mr. President, I'm very proud that the Working Families Tax Cuts protects a lot more family businesses from this unfair tax. In this bill, Republicans permanently raised the exemption threshold on the death tax, and a lot of small business owners, farmers and ranchers, breathed a sigh of relief that they don't have to worry about losing their livelihood when they lose a loved one. Mr. President, last week was Small Business Week. It was also Travel and Tourism Week. In South Dakota, tourism is one of our leading industries. Last year, 15 million people visited the Mount Rushmore State. They came to see that iconic monument, to see the South Dakota Badlands and the bison herds at Custer State Park. Some came for conferences in Sioux Falls, others for our legendary pheasant hunting. All told, Mr. President, last year tourism brought $5 billion to South Dakota's economy. And I have to think that a lot of that money was spent at our state's small businesses, at our restaurants, coffee shops, and breweries, with tour operators, hunting guides and outfitters, and many more. Mr. President, like the other small businesses in our state, businesses in the tourism industry are benefiting from tax relief and the working families tax cuts, lower small business tax rates, investment incentives, the 199A small business deduction. Mr. President, some of the most positive feedback I've heard from small business owners about the working families tax cuts is how much this bill helps their employees. The no tax on tips and no tax on overtime provisions in this bill are especially game-changing for folks in hospitality and tourism. That includes waiters and bartenders, of course. It also includes people who work as tour guides, entertainers, and drivers. Mr. President, many Americans look forward to the summer for a few days away with their families. And those who work in hospitality and tourism, for those who work in hospitality and tourism, summer means more customers and more money. And the working families tax cuts ensures that more of the money they earn stays in their pockets. Mr. President, Democrats may try to claim the working families tax cuts was about billionaires, but the American people know the truth. Farmers, ranchers, and small business owners know it's helping them free up money to meet their expenses and invest in their operations and in their employees. And hardworking Americans can see that the working families tax cuts lets them keep more of their hard-earned money. We call it the working families tax cuts for a reason, Mr. President, and I'm proud to report that working families are benefiting.
Schumer touched on economic inflation, President Trump's proposed gas tax holiday, his trip to China, and hantavirus.
First, on inflation and the inflation ballroom. Inflation is skyrocketing at the fastest pace in 3 years. The American people are hurting, and Donald Trump is to blame. Inflation rose to 3.8% in April because of Donald Trump's costly tariffs, his disastrous war with Iran, and failed economic agenda. So much for Trump's promise to bring down costs on day one. 3.8%, the highest in 3 years. And again, it's all because of Trump's tariffs, his war with Iran, his failed economic agenda. The American people are furious about how Donald Trump and his MAGNA majorities in Congress have turned a blind eye to the number one issue facing the American people, their rising costs. A CN poll this morning found that 77% of Americans say that Trump's policies have raised costs in their community, and that includes a majority of Republicans. 77%, including a majority of Republicans, blame Trump for their higher costs. Only 30% of Americans approve of his handling of the economy. That's a record low. Among the most common words the poll's respondents used to describe their economic situation right now were uncertainty, stress, dread. Donald Trump, are you hearing that? The American people look at your economic policies and describe them as filled with uncertainty, fill them with stress, fill them with dread. That's a pretty strong word. Instead of listening to the American people, Donald Trump and the GOP put forward a reconciliation bill that would force Americans to pay for Trump's billion-dollar ballroom and tens of billions more for Trump's masked agents, while including $0 to bring down American costs. Ask Americans, how many people want to see $1 billion for a ballroom and no money to help reduce the cost of food, the cost of electricity, the cost of housing, the cost of child care? When will Republicans take the hint? When will they realize that Americans want lower costs, not a gold-plated ballroom for our billionaire president? It seems all the president's concerned with these days are vanity projects, not things that make the American people's lives better. Democrats will fight Republicans' ballroom bill tooth and nail. And Republicans here in the Senate should do the same if they have any sense. Can you believe it? You guys are walking off a cliff. Funding $1 billion ballroom when people are hurting? It makes no sense. No sense at all. Now, on Iran and the gas tax. On Iran and the gas tax. Trump recently signaled to American motorists to buckle up, saying that the ceasefire with Iran is, quote, on life support. The American economy is also on life support because of Trump's mishandling of his illegal war. Americans are paying over $4.50 for a gallon of gas because Donald Trump refuses to end this war. $1.50 more than when this war started. Americans need every cent they can get right now, and Senate Democrats will work with whomever it takes to bring down costs. But Republicans need to realize that Donald Trump's proposal to suspend the gas tax is simply not enough. 18 cents of gas relief a gallon, 18 cents of gas tax relief a gallon doesn't even come close to the $1.50 gas price increase from this war. And Republicans need to stop pretending that it does. Offering Americans literal pennies on the dollar to cope with skyrocketing gas prices just won't cut it. 18 cents is not $1.50. If Republicans want to get serious about lowering costs, they'll support Democrats' War Powers resolution, coming up once again this week, to withdraw American troops from hostilities with Iran. This week, Republicans will have their 7th opportunity to vote for our War Powers resolution, get our service members out of harm's way, and rein in these skyrocketing costs. I urge Republicans to join Democrats and the American people by supporting the resolution. Americans can't afford for their economy to be left on life support, which is why we need to end this war and get our economy back on track. On Trump going to China, there's an old saying that only Nixon could go to China, but soon they'll say only Trump could sell out to China. Xi Jinping has Donald Trump salivating at the prospect of $1 trillion Chinese investments in America that would threaten America's supply chains, threaten economic independence, threaten national security. Strengthen China at the expense of American strength. Donald Trump wants a deal with China so badly he could sell out on American manufacturing. He could sell out on chips. He could sell out on Taiwan, which produces many of these chips. He could sell out on AI and on any number of grave issues that will determine who dominates the 21st century. Right now, again, to get his photo in the newspapers and try what work to raise his very low poll numbers, he's going to sell out to China. We can't let Trump willingly give China our superior American technology or allow him to serve Taiwan to the Chinese Communist Party on a silver platter just so he can get the satisfaction of saying he made a deal. For decades, Trump has complained about how China has cheated America. If Donald Trump wants America to outcompete China, he cannot let Xi Jinping take him for a ride. On the hantavirus, we continue to pray for all American cruise ship passengers exposed to hantavirus and those who remain in quarantine. I can only imagine how distressing this experience has been. The Trump administration's gutting of America's public health preparedness has made the recent hantavirus outbreak even more alarming. We often say you don't miss something until it's gone, and that's certainly true of the cruise ship inspectors, disease detectives, port health station staff, and other pandemic experts that Donald Trump purged without a second thought. Cutting the CDC's vessel sanitation program, as well as a pilot program to study the hantavirus, Trump may as well have invited the virus to our shores. If the Trump administration wants to keep Americans safe, he should follow my plan to rehire the infectious disease experts he fired, to restore the funding for the programs that protect Americans from these illnesses, and to rejoin the World Health Organization and other monitoring organizations to contain these outbreaks before they spread. After COVID-19 struck, we knew it was a question of when, not if, the United States would face another pandemic threat. Instead of investing in public health to meet that threat, the Trump administration has raised the white flag and lowered our defenses. I yield the floor.
This program is copyrighted by Federal Network Incorporated and provided only for informational and educational purposes. Unauthorized reproduction, distribution, or use of this episode without expressed written permission from FedNet is prohibited. Thanks for listening to this FedNet podcast.